They say betrayal cuts deeper when it's delivered with a smile. I found that out the night I was dressed in emerald green silk, standing beside the man I'd built a life and legacy with for nearly 3 decades. The ballroom was glowing with chandeliers, Christmas trees, and the whispers of Charleston's elite. And I, Vivian Caldwell, smiled politely, unaware that I was seconds away from becoming a public relic of someone else's future. "Everyone," Matthew called, tapping his champagne glass with the confidence of a man who knew the room belonged to him. "I have an announcement to make." The room hushed. I expected a holiday toast. Maybe a donation pledge for our foundation. Instead, he said it. "I'll be stepping down as CEO next quarter, and Riley Dane will be assuming the new role of creative director. She and I are building something exciting together, personally and professionally." The air left my lungs. There was a pause before the first gasp rippled through the crowd. I watched our children freeze, Cole, clutching his wine, jaw slack. Grace, blinking too fast, too stunned to even look my way. I had mentored every executive in this room. I had created the financial systems that built Caldwell Maritime from a regional logistics firm to an international shipping powerhouse. And yet, tonight, I was a footnote, a formality to be replaced with youth and lipstick. Riley stepped forward. 23, blonde, tall, the perfect accessory in heels and ambition. She smiled wide, lifted her glass, and said, "To new beginnings." My hands trembled. I set down my drink before it slipped. The applause that followed was hesitant, uncomfortable. But it happened. Right there, beneath golden lights and garlands. Later, as I stood in front of the hotel's restroom mirror, I stared at the woman who had made herself smaller for decades. I traced the crow's feet at the corner of my eyes, the thin line where my lipstick had faded. I was 52. I was aging, but I had not aged out. I still had power. I just hadn't used it yet. By the time we returned home, the kids were silent. Grace went straight to her room. Cole asked if I wanted tea. I said no. Matthew was already on his phone in the study, laughing. Probably with Riley. Probably making travel plans. I sat in the kitchen and opened my laptop. In my inbox was a message from Charles Lind, the estate attorney of my late mentor, Eleanor Hartline. Subject line, transfer of control. I clicked it. My heart began to hammer as I read. Eleanor had left me not just shares. She had left me full ownership of Hartline Logistics, Caldwell Maritime's oldest and fiercest competitor. The paperwork was complete. I just hadn't claimed it. Until now. Suddenly, everything shifted. Every betrayal, every lie, every calculated cruelty, it wasn't the end. It was ignition. I closed the laptop slowly and stared at my reflection in the oven's glass door. I no longer saw the discarded wife. I saw a weapon. And it was time to draw blood. The night ended with snow brushing against the windows. Charleston rarely got snow. It was as if the city itself was stunned into silence, bearing witness to the first crack in an empire about to fall. One built with my hands. One I was about to bury. Next time Matthew looked into a mirror, he wouldn't see his youth reflected back in Riley's eyes. He'd see the shadow of the woman he thought he'd outgrown, and the empire she now owned. The next morning, Charleston woke with a rare hush. A light dusting of snow lingered on wrought iron balconies and red brick streets. I brewed coffee like I always did, but the ritual felt different. My hand didn't tremble when I poured it. My shoulders didn't sag like they used to. Something had shifted inside me, a strange calm, the kind that settles in just before a calculated storm. Matthew came downstairs humming. He kissed the air near my cheek. "Hell of a night," he muttered. "Things are moving fast, huh?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He poured himself orange juice, oblivious. Still in control. Still blind. As he reached for his phone again, I said, "Eleanor Hartline died 3 weeks ago." That made him pause. He looked up, curious, maybe even cautious. "She left me her company." I let the words hang in the air, soft but sharp. "All of it. Heartline Logistics. I'm the sole owner now." His smile wavered. "That's impossible," he said. Eleanor hated shipping. She only attended the board meetings for appearances. "She trusted me," I said simply. "And she saw what I built. What you took credit for." For the first time in years, Matthew looked at me like I was unpredictable. Not irrelevant. Not dull. Dangerous. I left the kitchen before he could respond. Upstairs, I called Charles Lynn to finalize the transfer. "You're now listed as CEO," he confirmed. "Control is absolute. Assets, fleet rights, software. Everything is yours." I asked him to prepare 3 more documents: a cease and desist for Caldwell Maritime's use of our patented logistics software, a notice of acquisition intention, and a freeze order on any upcoming tech expansions that mirrored Heartline's proprietary systems. It was a bold move. But it wasn't reckless. By noon, I was at my lawyer's office. Allison Mendez, sharp as glass and just as deadly, reviewed everything with speed and silence. "You have leverage. Serious leverage. If we hit him now, he'll buckle." She tapped her pen. "But you're not ready for the kill yet, are you?" I shook my head. "Not until I see her name come off the office door." Allison smirked. "Then we bleed him slowly." That afternoon, I began working from Heartline's private headquarters, a sleek tower overlooking the Charleston Marina. I hadn't stepped into this building since Eleanor's memorial. But the staff welcomed me with respect, some even with relief. They'd never trusted Matthew. And now, the rightful queen had returned. I spent the next week in silence. No contact with Matthew. No confrontation. Just preparation. I reviewed every client list, every contract, every vulnerability in Caldwell's crumbling infrastructure. I mapped the cracks. I widened them. Riley's smiling face appeared on my feed more than once. Her branding campaigns were flashy, hollow, and full of promises the systems behind them couldn't deliver. And on Friday morning, I made my first move. A single software key was revoked. Caldwell Maritime's back-end logistics froze. Shipments stalled. Clients panicked. Tech teams scrambled. By 11 a.m., Matthew's office line had called mine 16 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the window and watched the harbor. A Caldwell ship sat idle, cranes frozen mid-lift. It was only the beginning. I was going to take everything, not in anger, but in precision. With the same meticulous grace I had once used to hold our marriage together. Now, I was dismantling his empire. Brick by brick. Name by name. Smile by smile. By the 3rd day, Matthew finally realized this wasn't a glitch. It was war. He showed up unannounced at the Heartline Tower lobby, wearing his favorite navy suit and his crisis management smile. Security called up. I waited exactly 9 minutes before replying, "Tell him I'm unavailable." His voice echoed through the line, insisting, demanding, then pleading. I watched it all through the camera feed on my monitor, and when he finally left, I returned to the strategy board. We were approaching phase 2. That afternoon, Allison and I scheduled a surprise sit-down with Caldwell Maritime's largest client, Carrington Global Freight. They had been uneasy about Matthew's leadership ever since Riley's appointment. Her Instagram-friendly campaigns, filled with drone shots and buzzwords, meant nothing to a logistics conglomerate that cared about punctuality and reliability. They were quietly shopping for alternatives. I was prepared to give them one. We arrived at the Carrington offices at precisely 10:30. I wore Eleanor's navy blue power suit and carried a portfolio that spoke louder than any slideshow. Allison handled the legal side. I handled the numbers, projections, penalties, profits. The moment I explained that Heartline systems were fully integrated, AI optimized, and ready for immediate transition, Carrington's CEO leaned back and said, "So, you're the real architect." "I always was," I replied. "I just stopped hiding behind someone else's name." The meeting lasted an hour. Before leaving, I handed him a sealed envelope. "A formal termination clause is in your Caldwell contract," I said. "You'll want to review Section 4C. By evening, I got the call. Carrington had officially ended their 21-year relationship with Caldwell Maritime. Matthew's silence didn't last long. He left a voicemail, not angry, not smug this time. "Shaken. Vivian. We need to talk. You've made your point. But let's not destroy what we built. Please. What we built." He said it like I hadn't been the hands behind the scenes all along. Like he was the one who stayed up till midnight reconciling accounts. Like he was the one who sat through software audits and department overhauls while he played golf with clients and posed with Riley at charity brunches. I didn't call back. Instead, I sent a single email. Subject line, "Intellectual property violation." The attached document listed every instance Caldwell Maritime had used or replicated proprietary Heartline software without permission. The fine print at the bottom was surgical, a 72-hour window to cease usage or face a federal injunction. Riley posted a vague tweet the next day. Something about jealous exes clinging to the past. She tagged a selfie in a designer coat that Matthew likely bought using company funds. The comments were brutal. The whispers had started. Clients were noticing. Investors were calling. Caldwell Maritime's board of directors, the very same men who once applauded Matthew's vision and treated me like furniture, now scheduled an emergency meeting, without him. Allison leaned across my desk with a slow smile. "You know what they say about karma," she whispered. "Sometimes, it wears red lipstick and signs paychecks." That night, I stood alone in the top-floor office of Heartline Tower, staring down at Charleston's glittering bay. I thought of Riley, so certain of her place beside Matthew. So smug in the way she tossed my name out of rooms I built. She thought she was writing me out of the future. She had no idea I'd already rewritten the ending. The call came at 7:28 in the morning. Allison's voice was clipped and clear. "They're moving against him. The board just voted to suspend Matthew pending investigation. Formal notice goes out today." I didn't respond right away. I was staring at the window of the bedroom I once shared with him, the same house that still held the scent of betrayal in the corners. I had come back alone to pack up the last of my things. The staff had been instructed not to disturb me. I wanted to walk the rooms, one by one, and remember everything I had been blind to for far too long. The kitchen where I'd made coffee every morning while he scrolled through emails, already thinking about the next investor dinner. The hallway where Riley once giggled behind closed doors, thinking I couldn't hear her heels click on my floors. The living room mantel, lined with photos he'd refused to take down, not out of sentiment, but out of laziness. I walked upstairs into our closet and found something I hadn't expected. A drawer filled with unopened credit card bills, all addressed to Matthew, all maxed. Luxury brands. Boutique hotels. A bill from a private retreat in Turks and Caicos dated 2 weeks before Christmas. I hadn't even noticed he was gone that weekend. He told me he had been in Chicago for a shipping summit. I took pictures of everything. Evidence mattered. Not just for legal protection, but for truth. I'd spent years accepting his lies, smoothing over his carelessness, dressing up his ambitions in the language of partnership. Now I was unmasking it all, one receipt at a time. Downstairs, I found Grace waiting. My daughter had a solemn look in her eyes, older than her 26 years. "Mom," she said, "I saw the news." About the company. Are you okay? I nodded. I'm focused. She hesitated. Dad called. He said you're trying to destroy him. I'm not trying, I said. I'm succeeding. Grace winced. Do you ever wish it had gone differently? Every day, I replied. But I don't regret doing what needs to be done. She looked down at her phone. Cole said the same thing. He's proud of you. We both are. Even if it's complicated. Complicated was one word for it. For kids raised on the image of a perfect marriage, it was like watching a favorite painting catch fire. But they were adults now, old enough to know that some fires cleanse more than they burn. Later that evening, I returned to Heartline and found an envelope waiting on my desk. It was from Eleanor, handwritten, dated the week before she died. Vivian, it read. If you're reading this, it means you've chosen to step out of the shadow. Good. Don't stop. You see clearly now. Use that clarity. Rebuild what matters. And don't flinch. Not once. I sat with that letter for a long time. That night, the board's decision went public. News outlets ran the headline, Caldwell Maritime CEO suspended amid crisis. The article mentioned software breaches, client losses, internal instability. But buried in the middle, one line made me pause. Sources suggest internal power struggle sparked by the unexpected rise of competitor Heartline Logistics, now under the direction of CEO Vivian Caldwell. It was the first time my name had stood alone. Not beside his. Not under his. Alone. Sharp. Clear. Unapologetic. Matthew didn't call that night. But Riley did. She left a voicemail. Her voice trembled between indignation and desperation. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you can't erase me. You can't erase us. You're just bitter. She was right about one thing. I was bitter. But bitterness, when refined, becomes fuel. I pressed delete and leaned back in my chair. I still had one more card to play. And when I did, Riley's name wouldn't just be erased. It would be forgotten. By the end of January, Charleston had turned cold and gray, its usual coastal charm washed out by sleet and headlines. Caldwell Maritime was unraveling faster than the city's gossip channels could keep up. Investors were pulling out. Internal memos leaked. Rumors of fraud investigations circulated with teeth. Matthew had gone quiet. But I hadn't. Every morning, I showed up at Heartline Tower before sunrise. I walked the hallways Eleanor once ruled. I spoke with the teams. I listened, learned, adjusted. I wasn't just building a comeback. I was rebuilding myself, layer by layer. No longer as the quiet power behind a man in a tailored suit, but as the storm in heels and a signature pen. Still, not everything was clean. I hadn't heard from Matthew in over a week. No calls, no legal threats, no press conferences. The silence made me uneasy. Something was coming. I could feel it in the shift of the air, a pause before thunder. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my assistant buzzed through. Vivian, he's here. I didn't have to ask who. Let him in, I said calmly. Matthew walked into my office like a man stepping onto unfamiliar ground. He looked thinner, paler. The confident smirk that once came so easily was replaced by a twitch at the corner of his mouth. I said nothing, just watched him scan the space, taking in the Heartline branding, the framed articles on the wall, the photo of me and the new executive team celebrating the Carrington deal. This used to be yours, he said softly, almost with awe. No, I corrected. It was never mine. I made it mine. He sat down across from me, folding his hands. You've proven your point. I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't proving anything. I was correcting the narrative. He swallowed. You've taken everything. The clients, the contracts, the software. You've poisoned my name. Riley's gone. The board won't return my calls. I've lost everything. Not everything, I said, reaching into a drawer. I placed a single photograph on the table. It was us. Our wedding day. Young, naive, proud. I slid it toward him. You still have that version of yourself. Somewhere. He looked at the photo and blinked fast. His voice cracked. You were always better than me. No, I said. I was just quieter. And you mistook that for less. We sat in silence. Then he leaned forward, desperate. Let me work with you. We built this industry together. You know that. I smiled, not cruelly, but with finality. We built it. Past tense. And you bulldozed your half with your pride. His jaw tightened. You're enjoying this. No, I replied. But I'm not apologizing for it. He stood, looked at me for a long time. You're not the woman I married. You're right, I said, rising too. I'm the woman you thought you could bury. He left without another word. That night, I stood in front of my mirror, the same one I used to rush past on the way to his meetings, his events, his life. I looked closely. The fine lines were still there. The hair was still silver at the roots. But the eyes? They were sharper now. Clearer. Alive. Not the eyes of someone who'd been left behind, but of someone who had arrived. And tomorrow I would erase the final trace of his legacy, not with fire, but with ink. The rain was still falling when I arrived at the building once known as Caldwell Maritime Headquarters. Heartline had officially acquired it the week before through a quiet series of real estate transfers, shell companies, and non-disclosure agreements. It was poetic, really. I didn't just take Matthew's company. I bought the very building where he'd built his lies. And now I would rename it. I stepped out of the car and into the storm with purpose. Inside, the lobby was nearly empty, the marble floors echoing beneath my heels. I nodded at the building manager, who handed me the updated architectural plans with trembling hands. He had been working under Matthew for 15 years. He didn't know whether to welcome me or fear me. Both were acceptable. We rode the elevator to the top floor, where Riley's old office, my former guest space, was already being repainted. Her gold plaque had been removed from the frosted glass 2 days ago. I didn't ask where it went. I didn't care. Next door, Matthew's old office door still read, Matthew Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer. The lettering was faded from time and pride. I paused, staring at it. The building manager cleared his throat. Would you like us to remove it now, ma'am? I turned to him. No. He blinked. No. I'll do it myself. He stepped back. I walked to the door, reached up, and peeled each metallic letter off with slow, deliberate fingers. One by one. The M. The C. The title he wore like armor, like birthright. Gone. When I finished, I handed the letters to the manager. Melt them down. Use them for scrap. Or make doorstops. Doesn't matter. They're no longer of use. He nodded, silent, reverent. Across the hall, a new brass plate had already been mounted. Vivian Heartline, President and CEO. Not Caldwell. Not someone's wife. My name. My power. My future. I walked into the new office, redesigned to my exact vision. No dark wood or masculine leather. It was all clean light, white stone, soft grays, and warmth. A space of clarity and control. A space no man had built for me. I built this. I claimed it. I earned it. Allison called later that day. The press release is out, she said. Want to hear the headline? Surprise me. Heartline Logistics finalizes acquisition of Caldwell Maritime assets. New leadership promises restructuring and integrity. I smiled. Integrity. That'll confuse them. Not for long, she replied. You ready for the next phase? I was born ready for it, I said. That afternoon, I called an all-staff meeting. Caldwell employees, now Heartline staff, filled the conference hall. Some nervous, some suspicious, a few still loyal to a ghost. I stood at the podium and spoke clearly. Some of you knew me as Mrs. Caldwell. Others barely knew me at all. But starting today, there is no Caldwell Maritime. That chapter is closed. The people who remain are here because you were never the problem. The leadership was. I won't rebuild what they broke. I'll build something new, with or without those who resist it. There was silence. Then someone clapped. Then more. Then the entire room. Applause didn't move me, but their respect did. As the meeting ended, one junior assistant approached me, eyes wide. Did you ever think it would come to this? I paused. I didn't think it would be necessary. She nodded. But you made it look like it was always meant to happen. I watched her walk away. That night, as the building lights dimmed behind me, I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the new logo already being projected onto the glass. Heartline. It shimmered in the rain like a promise. One chapter had ended. But the best revenge stories? They don't end at the win. They begin with what comes next. 2 weeks after the acquisition, the time came to tell the world. Heartline Logistics would no longer operate in the shadows of Caldwell Maritime. We had stripped it down to its bones, salvaged what was worth keeping, and rebuilt it into something unrecognizable to anyone still clinging to the past. The press event was scheduled at the Assembly Hall on East Bay Street, a striking venue wrapped in glass and steel, with floor-to-ceiling views of Charleston Harbor. It was the same venue Matthew and I had used a decade earlier to launch his now-failed Global Blue expansion campaign. I had organized that event. I had written every talking point, but no one ever asked me to take the mic. Now the mic belonged to me. Allison stood beside me as the final checks were made. You good? She asked, adjusting the cuff of her slate-gray blazer. I nodded. Better than good. The room was packed with reporters, local officials, and several of the same men who had once underestimated me, men who now waited with notepads, recorders, and forced smiles. The tension was electric, and I was about to light the match. I stepped on stage without fanfare. No intro music. No dramatic voiceover. Just the sound of heels against polished wood and the rustle of shifting attention. The screen behind me illuminated with the new company logo. Heartline Logistics, I began, was built not just on technology and trade routes, but on principle. Transparency, fair leadership, and performance that doesn't require press releases to be proven. There were chuckles. Eyes sharpened. I continued. For too long, this industry celebrated figureheads while silencing the architects behind them. I was one of those architects. You knew me by another name, perhaps, but that name is no longer on any door, not on any ledger, not on any future plan. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled. I let them. Heartline will be run differently. No family dinners disguised as strategy meetings. No favoritism. No influencers deciding company policy. Just results. Just people who know how to build. A hand shot up in the second row, a CNN affiliate. Ms. Heartline, is it true you personally revoked access to the Caldwell Maritime software systems that led to their logistical crash? I smiled. It's true I ended unlawful use of intellectual property. The consequences of that decision weren't mine to choose. They were inevitable. Gasps. Murmurs. Satisfaction. Another reporter shouted, "Where is Matthew Caldwell now?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I paused, eyes sweeping the room. "That's not my concern," I finally replied. "We don't look backward here. We're building what comes next." After the applause died down, I stepped away from the podium, heart steady. Backstage, Allison grinned. "You just buried him on live television." "I didn't bury him," I said. "He dug the hole. I just let the world look in." That night, news segments replayed my speech on a loop. Riley's name trended on social media, not as a rising influencer, but as a symbol of corporate naivety. Screenshots of her last campaign, now defunct, became memes. The caption beneath one said, asterisk, from branding queen to cautionary tale. Asterisk. I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. She had played her part. So had Matthew. So had I. But the story wasn't over. As the press moved on and the world turned its gaze elsewhere, I was already in motion, signing deals, launching new trade routes, empowering women in maritime business across the Southeast. Revenge had never been the goal. But justice? That was just getting started. There are always loose ends in stories like these. The ones that don't unravel until the storm quiets down. And mine came wrapped in cream-colored linen, tucked into a sealed envelope labeled in careful handwriting, to be opened when you're finally free. I found it in the back of a wall safe at the old Caldwell estate. The house was in the final stages of being sold. I'd already removed every item of value, erased the echoes of a life I no longer claimed. But something about that locked drawer pulled me back for one last visit. I knew the handwriting instantly. Eleanor Hartline. She had written it not long before she died. I stood alone in the empty study, the walls bare, the windows fogged from coastal drizzle. I broke the seal. "Vivian," it began. Asterisk freedom doesn't always feel like flight. Sometimes it feels like weight. The weight of all you finally stopped carrying. If you are reading this, then you've taken the path I always hoped you would, not of vengeance, but of reclamation. Of your name. Of your place. Of your voice. Asterisk. I sat down slowly, letting the silence wrap around me like a second skin. Asterisk, you will be tempted to look over your shoulder, to wonder if you should offer a hand to the ones who let you fall. But some hands are not meant to be held again. Some are meant to be remembered, so that you never forget what silence costs. Asterisk. The words blurred slightly. I blinked them clear. Asterisk, you built more than a company. You built a spine where others saw service. You built legacy where others sought image. You are not the echo of a man's ambition. You are the origin of your own. Asterisk. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street was quiet. I walked through the house one final time, not as a widow of a marriage, but as the author of a new future. The house would be gutted soon. The developers had plans to level it, rebuild from scratch. I allowed myself a brief smile. Let them erase it. Let the ground start fresh. 2 days later, I hosted Heartline's first Women in Logistics Summit. We packed the main ballroom of the Hotel Bennett with over 100 rising executives, dock managers, engineers, and strategists. Every seat filled by a woman who had been told, at one point or another, "This isn't your lane." I stood at the podium, no longer needing permission to speak. "We are not here because we waited for someone to see us," I said. "We're here because we stepped into the space anyway." The applause thundered. I caught sight of Grace and Cole at the back of the room. They had come quietly, without fanfare, their expressions soft. It hadn't been easy for them, watching their family fracture, watching the media storm. But tonight they were present. Afterward, Grace approached me. She hugged me tight and whispered, "You're different now." "No," I whispered back. I'm just not hidden anymore. That night, I placed Eleanor's letter in a frame on my nightstand. It sat beside a new journal, the one where I'd begun drafting the next expansion of Heartline, this time into education and mentorship. The days of watching others take credit were gone. Now I would teach others how to take up space, how to rise, how to endure, and most of all, how to never need permission again. By early spring, Charleston streets bloomed with dogwood and magnolia, but one name had withered beneath the weight of consequence: Caldwell. Once a fixture in local power circles, now it was a whispered cautionary tale, traded between attorneys and real estate agents with the same tone used for family secrets. Matthew had vanished from the public eye. No more features in trade magazines. No more charity appearances. No more ribbon cuttings or yacht galas. The man who once treated the city like his personal stage had retreated into silence, forced to sell his remaining assets just to cover legal fees. Word had spread. The SEC was sniffing through his offshore dealings, and creditors had filed 2 lawsuits for breach of contract tied to logistics promises Caldwell Maritime could no longer fulfill. I hadn't lifted a finger to assist. I didn't need to. My silence spoke louder than any retaliation, and the empire he built on my back was crumbling without my hands holding it up. Then came the letter. It was delivered to Heartline Tower, hand-signed, not through attorneys. No threats. No dramatics. Just a simple request. Asterisk, would you meet me? One last time. No lawyers. No headlines. Just us. M. Asterisk. I stared at it for a long time. The old version of me, the one trained to be gracious, might have considered ignoring it. But I wasn't her anymore. So I said yes. We met at a quiet bench along the Battery, under the iron gate of the White Point Garden, where the breeze carried salt and the weight of old ghosts. He was already there when I arrived, thinner, unshaven, eyes hollowed by stress. He stood as I approached but didn't reach for a handshake. Thanks for coming, he said. I sat beside him, legs crossed, hands still. I lost everything, he said flatly. The board, the house, the boat, Riley. You never had Riley, I interrupted. You had an escape plan. She just came with a pretty disguise. He nodded slowly. You're right. We watched the water for a while. He didn't cry. That would have been too easy. Instead, he simply deflated, the final breath of arrogance leaving his lungs. I always thought I was the brand, he murmured. The face. The vision. But I didn't realize. The numbers, the systems, the trust, they were you. I looked at him carefully. You didn't just underestimate me, Matthew. You erased me. That's not a misstep. That's a decision. I know, he said, and I came here to say, I'm sorry, not to win you back, not to change anything, just to acknowledge the wreckage. A long silence passed between us. Then I stood. You're lucky, I said softly. He looked up, puzzled. Why? Because I didn't want revenge, I said. I wanted the truth to breathe. You gave it to me. That's all I ever needed. And I walked away. He didn't follow. That night, I returned to my penthouse overlooking the marina. The lights of the port blinked below, cranes rising like skeletons, ships moving in and out, carrying goods built on timelines and trust. My trust. My systems. My company. The next day, the Charleston Business Journal published a headline. Asterisk Vivian Heartline named Industry Woman of the Year. Asterisk. The article praised my leadership, my recovery, my innovations, but none of that mattered as much as the tagline just beneath the masthead. Asterisk Caldwell Maritime dissolved as of April 1st. Asterisk. No announcement. No funeral. Just a legal line. A name erased. A man forgotten. And a woman, finally, undeniably, seen. The air was warmer now. Spring had taken hold of Charleston with full bloom, as if the city itself had finally exhaled. Along the waterfront, the Heartline Tower stood like a lighthouse of resilience, not the tallest building in the skyline, but the one with the clearest view forward. It had been exactly 6 months since I stood in a ballroom and watched the man I loved make a toast to his betrayal. Now, I was preparing for a different kind of evening. The gala tonight wasn't about glamour. It wasn't about vanity. It was about legacy. The Heartline Foundation, newly established, would award its first round of scholarships, all for women pursuing careers in logistics, engineering, maritime law, and technology. Fields where they were often told to be quiet, or invisible, or decorative. Not anymore. I stood backstage adjusting the clasp of my bracelet when Grace appeared behind me in the mirror. She wore a deep green gown, her hair pulled back in quiet elegance. "You ready?" she asked. "I've never been readier," I replied. She smiled. "You know what everyone's calling you, right? The quiet storm." I laughed under my breath. Fitting. We walked out to a standing ovation. The ballroom wasn't just filled with powerful people, it was filled with women who had once been pushed to the margins. And tonight, they stood at the center. I took the podium, not with nerves, but with clarity. I spent a long time building things I wasn't allowed to own, giving energy to dreams that weren't mine. And when I was discarded, many assumed I'd disappear. But I didn't. I reappeared. With purpose. Applause erupted. I waited. Then I continued. I don't want to be remembered as the woman who got even. I want to be remembered as the woman who got it right, who used what she knew, finance, strategy, precision, to carve a new lane and leave it wide enough for others to walk through. After the ceremony, I walked alone to the terrace overlooking the harbor. Lights danced across the water. Ships drifted in the distance, loaded with containers bearing the Heartline seal. The skyline shimmered. The air was calm. Cole joined me with a glass of champagne. "You did it, Mom." "No," I said. "I'm still doing it." He nodded. "Quiet. Dad's moving. Selling what's left. Heading north. I think he wants to disappear." "That's between him and his regrets," I replied. "He asked me to tell you something," Cole said. He said, "Tell her I was wrong about everything except one thing. She was always unstoppable." I took a long breath. He got that part right. We clinked our glasses gently. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the lights dimmed, I returned to my office. I placed the framed letter from Eleanor back on the shelf, next to a new photo, me, Grace, Cole, and the first class of scholarship recipients. Their smiles were different. Not perfect, not polished, but powerful. The kind of smile a woman wears when she realizes she doesn't have to wait anymore. She can build. She can lead. She can rise. And if anyone tries to stop her, she'll remind them, calmly and clearly, she owns the ground they're standing on.